Okay. Hi, welcome to the March 10th Economic Development and Tourism Committee. My name is Fred Chang. I am a council member, and I am just starting the meeting because our chair, Joe Morrissey, has been called away unexpectedly. I'd like to welcome him and everyone, and please introduce yourself. I'd say go from left to right, but I don't know that what I see on my screen is what you see on yours. So, Jim.
Sure. Jim Fisk, Principal Planner, City of Port Orchard.
Okay, and Nick.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director for the City of Port Orchard.
Thank you. And Cody.
Cody Clark, Executive Director of the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. And Sarah and Gary.
I'm Sarah Butler, and I'm representing G. Anderson Group as well as the Bay Street Association.
Gary Anderson, representing G. Anderson Group and the Port of Bremerton.
Great. Joe.
Joe Morrison with Kitsap EDA.
And Monica.
Monica Adams, and I'm just here with the Port Orchard Waterfront Alliance.
Oh, thank you. Connor.
Connor Dahlquist, Associate Planner for the City of Port Orchard.
Okay, and Heidi.
Heidi Fenton, Council Member of Port Orchard.
Okay, thank you and welcome. I guess, Joe, if you're ready, we are ready to hear about the Industrial Land Survey.
Sure. I've got to say I'm also having technical difficulties. So as much as I'd like to share my screen and walk through it, that's going to be a little bit difficult today because I'm joining by phone. But I'll just talk about where this came from and why we did it and what we found. So we started this process in summer of 2024, where we essentially said a couple things. One is that we know a large amount of federal investment is headed our way. This is federal investment that other communities typically don't get to see. This will be in excess of $10 billion for a community of 290,000 people. That's what Kitsap is. And one of the questions was, well, how ready are we to accept this investment? The Navy is going to need things to upgrade its shipyards. It's going to need administrative space in the community. It's going to need office space. It's going to need laydown yards where it can put large pieces of equipment and raw material. And it's going to need industrial and warehouse space. So actually, Nick Bond helped me select our consultant on the project, CAI. That was along with Daniel Morse. We selected CAI after a competitive process, and we started working on the Kitsap Industrial Land, Buildings, and Infrastructure Survey. It was out for comment through the end of February, so it's effectively 99% done, what's on our website. And I'll put a link to it after I talk through it about this a little bit. Sort of the key takeaway, the big number one thing that we found, and again, this is from an industrial lands perspective. There are other parts of the economy that are relevant. But the key thing that we found was that the most pressing near-term need for our industrial market and to have an industrial market centers on the creation of new industrial facilities and supporting that infrastructure quickly, which is really pretty challenging to do. Both power needs and waste needs are significant. That's what industrial users like to see. If you have that infrastructure in your community, along with industrial buildings, you're in a good place. If you don't have that infrastructure, you're in a more challenged place. And so that's probably where we see Kitsap. And when we compound that we're also outside the I-5 corridor, that becomes even more challenging. But again, there's good news. Last year, the Navy released a solicitation for offers asking for a bunch of space, and the amount of industrial and warehouse space, so just industrial and warehouse space that they sought in 2024 was 280,000 square feet, just over. They just released a similar request. So they went to the market last year, said, who will give us this space? They released that solicitation, and then essentially only one award occurred, and that was an award to Tim Ryan Companies for their building on 6th and Pacific in Bremerton. The Navy has just released a very similar solicitation for offers that closes in May. Their question is the same: who is going to give us the space? Now they are seeking quite a bit more space, period. They're seeking over 800,000 square feet of space, but the industrial and warehouse side is still 280,000 square feet. So it's really exciting that the Navy has this need, and we have seen it consistent over the last year of solicitations. Last year, they said they needed 280,000 square feet. This year, they said they needed 280,000 square feet. Unfortunately, there have not been warehouse or industrial deliveries of those kinds of buildings in our community for several years. And so that's something that you can find in our report as well, is that basically before 2020 is when we last saw these buildings created. The average building in our community that's an industrial building is well over 35 years old. And the youngest buildings are on Bainbridge Island and I believe in Port Orchard, and they are not young buildings. They are not new buildings. They're just the youngest that we have in this market. So again, what's our big takeaway from this 100-page piece of work in the last 6 months? It's that the most near-term pressing need for having an industrial center in an industrial market means create new industrial facilities and its supporting infrastructure quickly. So lots of potential in our community, limited infrastructure capacity in many areas, but the Navy represents a very unique opportunity for us. We also found that the majority of the industrial opportunity in our community, literally 90+% of it, of all the land that is zoned, rests along the Highway 3 corridor, and much of it is in Puget Sound Industrial Center, Bremerton. So seeing greater activation in that area would benefit the industrial market and help create capacity for jobs. There is also a theory that because we haven't had industrial deliveries for several years, that there may be pent-up demand. Vacancy rates have been at or near zero, and that is thought of as an unhealthy vacancy rate. You would want to see something in excess of zero since then. Kitsap County has experienced an unhealthy low vacancy rate below 5% since 2015, below 2% since the end of 2016. Healthy vacancy is typically 5% or above. So we've seen some increase in lease rates going from $7 to over $11 per square foot in that time, which is positive news. So I'm just going to talk about some of the takeaways and the recommendations from our report, and then I'll open it up for questions. So priority recommendations, again, the number one priority recommendation that you can see on page 9 is create new industrial facilities and supporting infrastructure as quickly as possible. Beyond that, the catalytic opportunities include opportunities perhaps to build the suit for the U.S. Navy. We talked about the 280,000 square feet that was in their solicitation for the last 2 years. Prioritize infrastructure extension in gap areas and Puget Sound Industrial Center, Bremerton, meaning to shore up some of the infrastructure gaps that may be known in that area. Look at subdividing and fee simple sale of catalytic sites in Puget Sound Industrial Center, Bremerton. Grow plans for priorities and funding, and explore a site readiness initiative. So one thing that we did in this report was we looked at other communities and what they're doing right. So they took this example of a verified industrial properties program in Detroit, where things are a little more targeted, and the land and the sort of the saleable opportunity is a little more verified. So it's a little more sort of broker ready or development ready for people to take that on. It's very difficult to have incentives in Washington state, but if incentives can be created, that's helpful. Reducing permitting timelines, increasing predictability is something that government can do to contribute positively. Assess infrastructure funding streams. Example infrastructure funding streams include tax increment financing districts, the local infrastructure financing tool, transportation benefit districts, local improvement districts, business improvement districts might all be helpful. And finding other ways to incentivize site assembly of large industrial parcels. So I will leave those recommendations there and take any questions you folks have.
Okay. So, Joe, of the available industrial lands, what percentage would you say is occupied by the Navy?
Oh, at this moment. So this study took the overall proportion of military industrial lands and kind of left it out of the equation. So we only looked at what we called ground truthed land, right? Because if the Navy's using a bunch of space on Bangor, A, it's the Navy's space, and B, it's on Bangor, it's not really available to the market. And they need that stuff to kind of move into anyway. So from this survey's perspective, you know, 0 or near 0. And it's pretty rare to see what the Navy's doing right now, which is asking for industrial space in the private sector. That is something that is uncommon with the Navy's needs. You know, usually they buy it and build it and have it have that asset themselves. But the shipyard investment is this thing that's going to come in for 10 years, more or less. And so it's kind of transient and transitory. So they're looking for facilities near the area where they can kind of move people and move things and use that for a period of time. And generally what's thought of is it's going to be around 10 years.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm wondering is like, how much of the available land would we want to develop just for the Navy for 10 years?
Yeah, so the survey says that, and Kita earlier before the survey called for about 350,000 square feet of new buildings to be developed. The Navy wants 280,000 square feet of buildings, but this is this is on top of what is already sort of in our market that isn't being met. And so we're sticking with the 350,000 square foot number because we think the number is actually quite a bit higher, but our community hasn't been having this kind of delivery in quite some time. So we think 350,000 square feet is realistic. Does that make sense? Gary?
I think another valid point, I read the abbreviated version of this report, and kind of Fred is concerned about is after 10 years, what happens? Well, it's very relevant in the report that it points out that there still will continue to be an ongoing need after the Navy is done with the whatever warehouse space is created. And that's extremely important to note, because you know, nobody's going to want to go out and build a building that's going to only last for 10 years on a strong lease agreement, and then they sit there with an empty building. So, you know, being in the real estate business, you know, intuitively we knew that there's no available warehouse space, but trying to convince people to build new warehouse spaces continues to be a little bit challenging, less so now than it used to be. But being able to convince them that after 10-year period or whatever the Navy uses the buildings, there still is going to be a demand is a very relevant selling point. So we can now, I think, go forward with some confidence as a result of this report to encourage people to put up warehouse buildings.
Thank you for that. I guess I'm also just concerned about if we only have one employer, which I know is not the case, but if I like to see of us having a more diversified base. And Gary, thank you for your comments.
I think my big takeaway is if we build it, they will come. And 10 years, our growth is going to be astronomical. And I mean, look what happened with Amazon up there at the Belfair, corridor on 3, that it's an enormous complex. So if we have space and the Navy vacates it, I hold like Gary that it'll fill. It'll make us more available for other large employers.
Mhm. Here, I got a
Yes,
question.
Heidi. Go.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Now, Joe, are you only looking over at the Navy or in the shipyard area over there, or land over here on this side of the water?
All right, I found the mute button. Good Lord.
It's
Well,
hard on the phone.
So I know it's anyway. No, we analyzed the entire Kitsap Peninsula for this. And there is some South Kitsap area that we analyzed and we talked with Nick about. It's actually outside of the city of Port Orchard, but within, I think, the UGA. So the short version is it's all kind of fair game. The interesting thing is just the level of opportunity that Highway 3 presents is just really strong, right? That it's thousands of acres. Give me a second, I'll try to find it in the report, but of something like 6,800 acres, 4,800 of it is in PSICD. It's really quite a bit. So let me see if I can find that and bring it up.
That's good, thanks. You kind of answered my question though when you said it's fair game all over the place.
Indeed it is.
Mhm.
Page 5.
Gary, did you have a question, Gary?
Well, I just wanted to point out another thing is that the report did point out that a good segment of the population that would build warehouse building wants to own the land underneath it. And even though the PSIC controls the largest quantity of industrial land, it's leased land through the port. And that probably is only valuable to maybe half of the people that would build warehouse buildings or need to put up a building. So, anything that's privately held owned land, there's a good market for those folks to put up buildings and speculate. So I don't know if that helps you or not, but I thought it would be relevant as you look at locations for industrial uses or zoning property for industrial uses and things like that. A lot of the good industrial land is already built on or used. The more difficult stuff is still available, but it'll get used up, even though it's more challenging to build on.
I guess just one thought that I would have as a city official would be wondering what are the city's options for increasing industrial land.
So I think, sorry.
I'm sorry, please.
So I think what Joe was looking for potentially, and he talked to me about this, but further into not in the executive summary, but in the actual report, it talks quite a bit about the Bethel South Corridor, just south of the city boundary, south of Fred Meyer, as being a potentially prime area for changing some land use designations to like a light industrial warehouse type zone that would allow for the types of buildings that are discussed in the report. And so I think one of the things that pending finalization of the report that we're going to be asked to consider is whether in our comprehensive plan we ought to be changing designations to, there is some industrial property near the near where Bethel crosses Highway 16. There's the landscaping supply place. There's a couple of storage type uses down there. And so does the footprint of that industrial zone increase and shift further north? And is that something that the city wants to pursue? And I think we're going to have some discussions about that going into 2026 and potentially considering some local amendments to the comprehensive plan. And we've also talked about annexing that area. And so we would want to change the land use designation prior to annexation if we were going to try to pursue annexation with the county.
Okay, it's always comforting to me to know that you've thought about something, Nick. So I appreciate that. It's like I haven't even formulated the question, and you've formulated a solutions. Great. Are there any other comments or discussion on this item from anyone? Okay. I guess we're ready for our next item, which is the discussion of our pre-application meetings.
Yeah, I can take this one. So we have had a pre-application meeting since our last meeting that we wanted to report to you on. The pre-application meeting that we had, this is the site plan for it. This is the shopping center at the southwest corner of London Bethel. There's this is where the AutoZone and the Rite Aid, a handful of businesses are located to the east of this new proposed building. And there is a proposed pickleball facility that would be an indoor pickleball use. The building as currently laid out is not allowed in the commercial zone pursuant to our design standards because it is an industrial metal building that was proposed. And so we've talked to the developer about what they would have to do to potentially make this work. One of the things is that the building is just too massive relative to what our design standards actually allow in our commercial districts. I was going to share another, we directed them, there's a similar use that was established in the city of Lacey. I think this is Lacey. This is an indoor pickleball facility, and you can see they've added roll-up garage doors to their building. But the really cool thing is that it's both indoor and outdoor. And so this is right near the grand opening of this place called 23 Kitchens down in Lacey. And so we encouraged the applicant, because this building is larger than what our design guidelines would allow. We said, look, if you can do a smaller building with some indoor and then some outdoor, we think you can create like a really active space that would be really well utilized. This one includes like a lot of different food options, and I think they also have food trucks in conjunction with the restaurant and bar that was provided with the pickleball facility. But you can see the number of people here at this Lacey facility. And so right now we're just waiting for the developer to decide, number one, if they want to proceed, but then to come back with a plan that more closely aligns to our design standards, because what they had proposed was just a massive metal building with no architectural features or windows or anything like that. And based on our current regulations, that sort of thing wouldn't be allowed.
Nick, what's the location? Is that south of Rite Aid?
It is west of Rite Aid. There's where there's a truck driving school that operated in that area, and they had a bunch of school buses and trucks that use a big gravel yard back there. I can share it on Google Maps here. Just bear with me. So here's Google Maps. So there's this big gravel area back behind the Sherwin-Williams paint store.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So
all right.
and there's a code enforcement case associated with the back half of this property. And so part of resolving that code enforcement case is they're proposing to actually develop that site and then make everything permitted. So we are working with them and just waiting for them to take the next step.
Okay. Oh, thank you. That's exciting.
Oh, how many acres is that, Nick, in the back?
It's a pretty large property. I think acreage isn't a good indicator because a good chunk of it is an existing stormwater pond, and there's also some critical areas back there. And so how much developable acreage and how much acreage total there is are two different numbers. But I think, let's see, it's at least 5 acres. I just don't think all of it's developable.
I didn't even know that was back there. I never go behind Sherwin-Williams.
And yeah, right? Yeah.
That's exciting. Okay, are there any other questions on this topic? If not, I would just like to add a good of the order. And if anyone wants to bring up a topic or mention something, I do have a couple. I'll start. One is that for those of you following the public market, there is a new, I guess, grocery store called Good Stuff, and they are awaiting their certificate of occupancy and will be opening shortly. I think that's sort of exciting because it's in the former place where Sue's or Dave's lavender and juice bar used to be. And the other item is that I would like to bring to a future Economic Development Tourism Committee the topic of the cabaret license that we heard from a member of the public. And I think John Morrissey also supports that. Heidi, it looks like you're interested. So I would just like to hear a little bit more from staff about what the license is, how many we have in the city, and what potential issues are. Just as a follow-up to someone who brought this to us.
Yeah, and I think the mayor sent out an email on the topic, and so right now we have a deadline for some code updates of June 30th, and so I think once we get through those code updates, my department would potentially be able to work on the issue. But until then, unless one of the other departments is able to take it on, we just don't have the bandwidth to tackle that topic until the summer.
Okay, but I just wanted to put it out there because we heard from someone who was asking for any feedback, or I think people can be very impatient and they feel they bring up something and we would talk about it right away, but at least if we could tell them that it's on the list and we might get to it by summer.
Yeah, and I did get that email too about it, for that cabaret license. I think the person that brought it up, or for a restaurant business, is everything's like redundant. And so I think that's a good topic just to go over, but I don't think an email went out to the restaurant owner. And that's why I think more questions were asked. So maybe the mayor should contact, Robert for all the answers, or it, because it didn't sound like it really got addressed. It was like, oh, it doesn't, it's only like $200 and it doesn't take a lot of staff time. But yet the point is it's a redundant for the restaurant owner, more money, and it's redundant and more time. So I think that was the issue.
And we can hear more about it, I guess, by summer, but yeah, I'll email the mayor and ask if he wants to reach out to the individual and let them know what to expect.
Thank you, Councilmember Chang. I appreciate that.
What is a cabaret license that would be different for, like, what is it?
A cabaret license is something that is required when you have live performances. So if you have live music, if you have dancing or other activities where crowds gather, and there's, I think that the building code probably does address some of these concerns now in ways that it didn't when these laws went into effect, but nearly every city in the state has cabaret license requirements going back to like the 50s and 60s, when you started seeing establishments that would have live music and dancing when there weren't adequate building codes to ensure that people can get out of the building, and what measures needed to be put in place. But anyway, I haven't had time to dive into it, and
So is it like live bands, right? So
yep,
they
it
want to
would
have
be, but it would also involve dancing. So it could be dancing for entertainment, like
could be performances, or it
1920
could be
stuff,
their
or adult dancing. It could be just like a nightclub or a dance club. It could be live music. So it covers a whole lot of different things.
That's interesting. All right, cool. Thank you for that. I was like, cabaret, what?
Yeah, it is an interesting term because we don't use it often. I mean, adult dancing would be probably a more modern topic, although that's a completely separate topic.
Was this the burlesque request? Somebody that I heard of had made a burlesque, and but I hear bits and pieces of stuff that filters down, and I go, what? What are we doing?
Something like that probably would fall under this umbrella. but it's an interesting topic because we don't hear about it much, and it may be covered by other regulations or ordinances. Okay, well, if there are no other items, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending.
Wait, Jim,
Oh.
Well, I was just gonna say, we are trying to use the Granicus software to roll out our agendas and packets. So if you go to the city's website, you can oh, I just had it. Under City Council Advisory Meeting Documents, there's an email update that you can sign up for all the advisory committees, Planning
you put it-
Commission.
can you put
all-
that link in the chat?
Oh, I
Can you
can
share it
try
on your
to-
screen if you see it?
Just, yeah,
Sure.
put the link in the chat.
There we go.
We
So
have
you
a
can,
chat, Monica?
I don't think
Do you have
chat's
a chat?
enabled on this.
Yeah, we're not allowed to chat because
let
it's,
me- let me
Yeah,
share
I'm
this
It'd be so
sorry.
real
much
quick.
easier to copy and paste. All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, yeah,
Uh,
we're not allowed to chat.
Hang on, let me.
We just have to talk face to face or,
I think this is it. Share it. Go ahead and share.
there's a lot of stuff on the website. It's just not always intuitive to find.
You see that now?
Yep, there it is.
Yes, thank you.
So if you go here, you can sign up for whatever you want updates on. And so Connor and I put it into Granicus and pushed it out this last week. So in the
Okay.
future, we're hopeful to do it this way, and then you can download the packet, that sort of thing, and get updates as soon as it's published, instead of relying on the email. So, but bear with us. We're still learning it. And Brandy and Janine have been awesome, but
No, this is good. So it sounds like individuals can select what they want to sign up for.
correct.
So we have sublists, and that's helpful. I usually sign up for everything, but not everybody wants that much. So thank you. That's helpful. I'm sorry. Are there any? Yes, Gary, please.
Are we gonna discuss at all the Port Orchard cruise issue?
We can.
Since it has to do with
I
tourism.
don't think any of the Wright City staff is here to speak to that. I'm not super involved in that, in the approval of events. That would be the mayor and the police chief and the clerk's office.
Okay. Well, the decision timeframe is waning on us on that issue if it hasn't already passed, but I thought it should be appropriate to talk about in this venue, but if we don't have the right staff here, then
I mean, I can tell you what I know, and what I understand is that, you know, in January we had an incident nationally where you had cars and people mixing at an event, and it was a pretty tragic outcome. And so the request to the organizer was that if they have participants at the cruise that want to leave before the event has concluded, that the cruise would need to designate different parking lots to have different exit times. And it would need to be a phased exit where at a certain time, one lot the barricades would be removed and those cars could leave and it would no longer be closed to the public. And so it sounds like that the organizers did not want to provide that sort of phasing plan. And we're told that the participants would not be allowed to leave or come and go as they please. They would have to come in at designated times and leave at designated times in order to manage the closure of the road in a way that pedestrians and cars aren't driving in that same space at the same time. So that's as much as I know. Councilmember King.
Brandy's raised her hand. Is she allowed to talk? Or
Yeah,
people?
I just promoted her to panelist.
Oh, okay,
so
thank you.
I
Yeah.
guess we could just.
Sorry, I didn't realize that Brandy was here, so she probably
Yay,
has
Brandy, thanks. I didn't see her
better
She's
either.
an
information than I
attendee,
do.
not a participant.
Good morning. Yeah, I was just listening in the background to make sure that, see if there's anything that relates to my department. So, yeah, so the administrative staff that processes special event applications for the city. I route those to all the departments, they review it, provide comment, and then also outside agencies. And so with the cruise, it's my understanding that there is a public safety concern when there is a mix of vehicles and pedestrians in mix. So we started this initiative a few years ago to rein in on the reduction of that mixture based on various concerns. And so the last couple of years, we have tried to bring the crews more aware to the severity of this. And so this isn't new to them. This is the third year that we have tried to get them to understand that we can't have that mix. There was a proposal this year when the crews and staff met with, including the mayor, earlier this year. And so we did provide a compromise to maybe have some of the participants. It's not necessarily the spectators that we're having concerns with, it's the actual participants of the registrants of the vehicles that are being displayed. And so historically what they've been allowed to do is to park their vehicles, let it show. They'll do the awards. Sometimes they don't hang out till the awards and they start leaving. So we've asked them to maybe put those cars that like to leave early on the, I'm directionally challenged. So it's over on the side of Bay Street, which is closest to the Kitsap Bank drive-through lot. So we've asked them to maybe, if we know that they're going to be leaving early, let's put the barricades just after that. And then as people leave, we move the barricades down. So that way they are leaving and exiting on the tail end of where the road closure is happening. That was not acceptable to the crews. So at that point, we can't move forward with having that mix. The new thing that came into play as well last year for all participants that are closing Bay Street. So Bay Street is a state highway. It is under the management and purview and approval of Washington State, Washington Department of Transportation. And so we sent off their review, and the main concern that they're now requiring participants is to provide a detailed description of how you are escorting, whether it's a parade or whether it's a line of vehicles or somebody's coming in and out. What is your plan to escort people out through crowds? And so we are required to let WashDOT know, and if it's not to their satisfaction, they will deny the use of closure for the state highway. So there's a couple of reasons that we haven't denied the permit because they haven't applied for the permit. But when we met in January, it was a recap of last year's event and also a plan of how we can move forward to maintain safety. So I know these aren't things that, that I know this isn't the direction that the city wants to do. But unfortunately, once we have been put on notice for 3 years in a row that there is a safety impact, we reached out to our insurance, and we're at risk now. So although we're not the insurance provider, the main insurance provider for that event, but we are on notice, and when you're on notice, the risk of liability increases significantly for us being listed as a lawsuit should something happen. I know that we haven't had a history of any events, danger to an event or any accident. And that's the goal, is we want to make sure that we don't have one on our record. We've had a couple of them nearby, whether it's a
Not
shooting.
at this event, though.
Yeah,
It's been
correct.
37
Not at
years
this
and they've
event.
had an incident in 37 years at this event.
Correct. And so there's things that have changed nationally and throughout the state that we're trying to make sure that we're ahead of it. We're trying to be proactive and not reactive. And so we need to have that into consideration when we're going through this process. So that's what I know. And I know that we're willing, if and to negotiate with the crews if they can provide us how they are going to have an exit plan should members decide to leave early that is not an emergency.
Thank you for that, Monica. You had your hand raised.
Who? Me?
Thank you very much.
Oh, Monica.
Yeah, Brandy, I've got a question. You said the state requires a detail on how you escort people out through crowds. Are there guidelines for that? Is there a way
No.
for us to know? Because
No,
as
they
the
just ask
Waterfront
us to
Alliance,
provide a summary and then we send it to them with a site plan
so
or
they
a
can't-
traffic control plan.
traffic control. It'd be nice to know, as an organization that likes to close the road on occasion, what do they want to see? Like, do they want to, I mean, obviously that makes sense to me that we've asked the crews to have an exit plan near the barricades, right?
Yep.
So like I was involved, what was that event? I think it was one of the night markets or something, and no, it wasn't that. Where I was literally the one in the middle of the road yelling at the cars to stop trying to exit, and the police were trying to send them towards the people, and the parade was coming. I was
for
out there
Fathoms,
going,
Monica.
no, and they sent a person around the block like 3 times before I started yelling at the police. So I frontline on the ground understand the safety and why, and I understand from the crews that 37 years of not having any issues, but times have changed. So as an event organizer, I would love to know, what do they want to see? Do they need flaggers? Do they need barricades? Do they, what are the things they want to see in order to approve it?
I mean, my recommendation is to reach out to Washington State Patrol directly and ask them what it is they're wanting to see. And the only reason why we were aware of their requirement is because we were applying for the state closure for the former Chimes and Lights event.
Holiday on the Bay.
That's how we were notified, is because we were seeking closure of the road. They asked us to do that. So when we met in January, we knew this was going to be a new requirement. And so we just informed the crews of that. So it's WashDOT's
it's tough to be in this spot because of course we want them.
Yeah.
Because it's a great event for our community.
Yeah.
And so how do we grow and shift and change and revise? But
and it's a huge event. It impacts multiple
it's our heart and soul.
streets. Yeah.
I think.
Randy, you mentioned WSP. Did you mean WSDOT or WSP?
Oh, I should know that.
And Monica, you can probably do
Thanks.
a public records request of WSDOT
Thank you.
at the very last, if you can't get an answer before that. But I'm not sure if you need to go to Washington State Patrol as well as Department of Transportation.
Oh, hold on. It's in our application. So it is WashDOT. It's the Washington Department of Transportation.
Okay.
They're the ones that require that. So
and that I was taking notes and then I stopped with the traffic summary. Is that it?
Traffic control plan.
Control plan. Thank you.
For TCP. Heidi, you have your hand raised?
Yeah. One question. Well, here, I'll do this one. So if we get back together or compromise and maybe have that, traffic, so they got to do a traffic and then
they have a traffic control plan. They have a traffic control plan.
They do.
Yes.
Okay. But they don't want to compromise with a safe zone where you kind of need, hey, put the cars here. And then if you want to go early, you can just head on out to the right over by the bank. So is that kind of the major thing, is not having a safe zone, that they don't want to comply to that?
That's my understanding of our last meeting. So when we had that, they were going to take it back to their board members to see if it was feasible. And the next thing we know that there was an email saying that based on the city's request, they're not going to put an application. So I don't know what the reasonings behind of why it would not work with their events.
My understanding is they came down to talk to you on Friday, Brandy, to set up an appointment to meet with the mayor to rediscuss. Is that correct?
I received a phone call from the president of the cruise, that he indicated that he wanted to speak to the mayor only, in person. And unfortunately, the mayor is out of town for this week, and the soonest he has available on his calendar is the 19th.
And did that meeting get scheduled?
I'm not quite sure. I don't know. I told the person that I would send an email to the mayor, and see if he would check his email, and I haven't heard from either party.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we're not gonna solve it here, of course, but I think it needs to be elevated. The discussion needs to be elevated to the top of the list, because it is a very, very important event for Port Orchard. And we need to find a solution. And if you're not a car person, that's the only way I can explain why the city's solution is not workable for car guys and car shows. But there's probably a solution there someplace. Car guys behave a certain way, and the Saints have done an amazing job of managing this for many, many years. So I think we need to look for a solution.
And at this point, that's up to the mayor and the police chief and the public works director to confirm that whatever plan that they come up with is meets public safety standards. So I just processed the event. I'm just kind of giving you a heads up of what I know of what's transpired, and it's my role is to approve it based on the conditions and recommendations of the police chief and the public works director, and I do not have that. Should they put in a special event application? So at this point, it's really up to them.
Question on that. So, we like city council found out, of course, with the public. Are we not allowed to go into those meetings or understand it more as a city council representing the people?
As long as you don't have more than 3 members of the council to trigger a quorum, or if you do have more than 4, or 4 and more, then you have to have a quorum. So that's up to the council if they want to attend those meetings. I just need to make sure that I know 48 hours in advance so I can notify the public should there be 4 or more.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Heidi, this might be a good topic to bring up at tomorrow's council meeting. Maybe a good of order or just an FYI, and find out more about what council's involvement could be or should be. Gary, thank you for bringing up this issue, because it's something that I think has a lot of thought behind it, and the council actually has not been involved in any of the decisions because it sounds like the policies aren't in place. But it would still be interesting. It would be helpful to find out more about it. Okay, is there any other topics that anyone would like to bring up? I hate to close the meeting without giving anyone a good chance, but this is your time. You can bring up anything that you believe is important or economic development related. If not, thank you for attending, and I look forward to seeing you next month.
Sorry, I was late.
Oh,
Thank you,
we all had
everyone.
technical problems.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.